GM, welcome back to another Genius Call. Look, we were at Art Basel last week. It was an exhausting and adventurous time to meet all of you in person. For everybody that didn't make it, we had our Black Friday drop. We hope you're continuing to participate with us there. I have to say, shaking hands with so many of our community members, watching the networking that happened, it was a really special moment for me as well as for the rest of us. Our mods, all of our folks that work so hard behind the scenes to make CPG what it is for you. It was really a great event for us, and we hope you feel the same way. We have a couple more things coming up this week. We have our town hall, which is scheduled for Friday. We're excited to give a sneak preview into season 3, as well as summarize some of our season 2 initiatives. But before we get started with our next guest, we also just want to continue to highlight that we had our Community Choice Awards. Go back and read up on all the wonderful teams that are contributing to our Builders Club and really give them a shout out on Twitter and figure out how you can better support them or get involved more. We're always looking for more feedback. We're always looking for more community of our builders to come together. And that's also why it's really special with the guest that we have today. There's a couple of moments in the world where products take over the meaning of what it is that it does. So I think of in the consumer packaged goods world, Kleenex. You say what a Kleenex is, it's a tissue, but you ask for a Kleenex. People who do search ask for Google. And now we're in this era where if you're on Web3, you ask for a PREMINT. And so it's really my joyous, I've been following Brenden for a long time through the podcasting industry. It's really a pleasure for us to have a true entrepreneur. Like Brenden is at his core an entrepreneur. He's done a lot of work. He worked really hard on his last project, which is still going, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But Brenden, thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the CPG fam, and we're just going to keep that going.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Great to be here.
So we're just going to start this going with, you're an entrepreneur. You hit a couple of things before PREMINT, and I kind of want to start your journey as an entrepreneur well ahead of the wonderful ride that has been PREMINT. So can you just give us a little bit about where you started and how you've been, where your entrepreneurial spirit came from and your origin story of sorts?
Yeah, I started totally outside of tech, actually in the music industry, and was interested. I just always loved music. I loved getting involved with bands, and I started putting festivals on in college and started to actually get to meet the creators of what I loved. And so that sort of brought me deeply into figuring out how I could help them succeed. And so I left after college, went and worked at a record label management company and worked one-on-one with artists to try to help them build their careers. And I did that for 4 years or something like that. And during this time, not to age myself, but it was sort of post Napster, but where MySpace was sort of the up and coming platform. And suddenly the idea of being able to take music and put it online and make it easy to listen to was unlocked. And so just all the musicians were flocking onto these online platforms, and it was becoming a really big problem to try to manage them and know where to actually put music and organize your digital life. And so I left the traditional music space and started building software for musicians to help organize themselves online. And that was, so it wasn't really an intentional, I want to go build companies. It was more the problem that the creators that I'm working with have, the biggest problem they have right now is trying to figure out how to do online, and it's super confusing, and I'm going to go try to help them. And so did a couple companies in the music space focused on musicians, then spent some time building consumer photo apps around the time Instagram was growing, and just sort of understanding what mobile was and how to build mobile experiences. And then that led to, because we were building all these apps, we sort of became the creator, and we were creating these apps, and we started realizing all the problems that existed around the creation of apps. And so we ended up building a suite of tools to help people create apps. Google took notice of that. They bought that in 2016. And I went over to Google and spent a few years at Google building things. And then, a few years ago, I left Google and just started working on a bunch of different projects. So that led me back down the rabbit hole of, every time I'd build something that wasn't creator focused, I sort of kept getting pulled into the creator side. And so that's that's how I got here.
Yeah, I want to pull the thread on I'm going to use a strong word here, but it feels like, from having been on other spaces with you and seeing your other products, like you have this real maniacal way of wanting to really help creators. And it shines through in every product. So for folks that aren't aware, there's this great product out there called Podpage. It is a creator tool. It helps podcasters get discovered easier. It helps them interact with their audiences. Talk to us a little bit about that journey of, like, this is right before Premint, how Podpage kind of came to be, and more of your insights into what was the gap in what you needed, and what was the creator experience that you were trying to solve for with that product.
Yeah, I think podcasts are great. I've always been a big fan, and I started noticing something that happened in podcasting that happened in music about 8 years prior. So, musicians all flocked to MySpace. They all built these huge audiences on these platforms, and then MySpace died. And so suddenly all of the tens of millions of dollars that the music industry had poured into building fan bases on MySpace, basically they disappeared, and they had to start over. And so the product I built sort of after that happened was a website builder for musicians. And the only goal was have a space on the web that is yours, that no other platform owns. And it's a place where you can collect email addresses and actually have a one-on-one conversation with your fans. So you build a relationship directly with them, as opposed to going through MySpace and MySpace goes away and your fans go away. So I saw that happen in music and what a disaster it was. And so as I got more into podcasting and learning more about it, I started realizing that a lot of podcasters didn't have a website. They launched, podcasting is amazing because you can launch through a podcasting hosting tool onto iTunes and Spotify and all the different places that people can listen. And it's amazing to get that free distribution, but ultimately, like, the relationship that you have with your listener has Apple in between you, or Google, or Spotify. And so, I just was kind of saw the potential problems in that I'd seen in the music industry. And so built a solution for podcasters to be able to really quickly spin up a website that has all of their content. Podcasting's cool in sort of a Web3 ethos. There's just basically all of the data that you put out there for your podcast is open source, essentially. With music, when you put something on Spotify, you're literally sending Spotify files, and the file is being transferred. With podcasting, when you launch a podcast, you're just putting a feed up, and anyone and anything can consume that feed and play the files and put the description of the episodes. So as someone building websites, it's actually really easy to take someone's existing content, and without them having to do anything, build basically a fully SEO friendly, very complete website. I mean, it literally takes like 4 or 5 seconds using Podpage. And so I just was like, all right, well, we can make this really easy. It was a fun project. It was a weekend project. The initial version was just sort of a prototype weekend project. And that, again, that's sort of like Premint. That just grew out of, knew a few podcasters. They didn't have websites. When I asked them why, they said it was a pain to set them up. I provided something that made it really easy to set up. And then it sort of very slowly grew from there over the course of a few years.
I think it's a perfect jumping off point into the Premint journey. I totally agree with you that podcasting is this wonderfully decentralized medium that sort of got jumped over by audio or by video. And now people like circled back in the pandemic to audio. I think Clubhouse and the live ephemerality of it most definitely came roaring back into folks who were extremely fatigued by staring at a screen. But there's something beautiful about just listening to stories and other people talk that you don't need to use parts of your brain by looking at a video. But your specific experience of optimizing the web to help a creator, I think, dovetails into Web3 and your journey there. Before we get into Premint, like, give us how did you come into Web3? What was your first NFT story? What really set the hook for, like, ooh, this is going to be fun?
I think so. I've always been interested in crypto and dabbled in crypto, and have been a horrible crypto investor since like 2012. And so I have a group of friends that we all talk about crypto together. And so when sort of the NFT movement started, Some of them kind of opened my eyes to what was going on there. And it sort of was, to be honest, I was a little skeptical. I didn't really get it. And I mint, I think my first mint was probably on Art Blocks, and it was, I think, a color study by Jeff Davis, I think. But honestly, it was like someone sent me a link and said, "Hey, go mint this. It might be worth something one day. Who knows?" And I did it, and it kind of like ended up in an OpenSea wallet, and I never paid attention to it. And then when Larva Labs did the Meebits mint, I think I did one of those. But again, like I just didn't take it very seriously. Then I had a child, and life kind of disappeared for a few months, and then came back to it at around the time where I was giving myself some time off of work, and just started joining Discords. And I've been friends with Kevin Rose for a really long time, and he had collected a few people in a small Discord that were all talking about art. And so I actually got to sort of the wow moment for me was like actually meeting the artists and hearing how the structure of NFTs and Web3 has changed their business model and their ability to make a living and their ability to be creators. That's when it clicked for me. And then it was that plus seeing like really what token gating meant. Like, oh, if I own this thing, then I get access to this stuff, and no one can debate whether or not I should have access because I own this. I can provably say that I own this thing. That kind of opened my, you can imagine like triggering all these things going back in my background, like, oh, artist fan clubs, oh, ticketing. There's so many things that like provable digital ownership sort of unlocks. So I sort of went from sort of being skeptical to being deeply interested. And so I spent about 2 months sort of getting my feet wet by just joining a small creator Discord and just spending all my time talking to artists. And that's kind of where a range of products came from. But what got me interested in starting to build for the community.
So it started with some art blocks. I hear you. I think I have a bag somewhere similarly that was like, this might be something. But for sure, I think a lot of folks who get enamored with Web3 have a similar journey. I think the really unique part about yours is you've built products like for a long time and been doing it in this extremely focused way of like listening intently to what the problems are and providing solutions for them, which is, it's a beautiful thing. I think our builder community is trying to do this across a wide range of things. That's why it's wonderful that you're here. What was the first salvo for pre-mint in the because I think early days there was there continue to be a lot of problems with Web3 and token gating and connecting. What was the first wedge that you found of like, ooh, I can solve this pretty quickly? Like, talk about that hackathon or that weekend you spent built. Like, what was the first problem and how did you kind of find it?
Well, so Podpage and a bunch of other products were all built on a product sort of prototyping framework that I had built over the last few years. So I have this thing where it makes it really, really easy for me just to come up with a general concept and put it out there and see what people think without having to go back and think about, a lot of boilerplate issues that you might have to think about when you're releasing software. So during COVID, I was like rapidly trying different ideas. One of them was like a QR code menu system for restaurants. And from start to finish, that whole project, and it was a total failure and no one used it. But that whole project took me about 4 or 5 hours to build. So I've taken like the level of effort really, really low when it comes to just trying a new idea out. And so I was sort of primed when Web3 came around, or when I came around to Web3, because I had that in my back pocket and I was interested in the space, but I didn't really understand the space. And when I don't understand the space, building is the way that I get into it. Like, I'm a horrible reader. And so this was always my problem with crypto. Is like a new coin would come out, a new project would launch and be like, oh, you should go buy this coin because they're doing this thing. And I'd try to like understand the thing they were doing or they wanted to do one day. And I saw the price of the coin go up and I just couldn't figure out like what to buy or when to buy it because I didn't really understand why these things were valuable. Because I couldn't use them and I couldn't like build on them. But the sort of the Web3 piece of it was I got to build first. And so actually the first thing I built was I feel like PREMINT was my 4th product, or maybe it was 3 or 4. But the first thing I built was like a product hunt for drops because I was coming into the space. It seems like there was a new mint every day. I couldn't keep track of them. I didn't think anyone was keeping track of them well enough. So I was like, oh, what if you took the product hunt and you just made that for drops? People come in, upvote, downvote drops. They could submit stuff. So that was called Alpha Drop. I built a whole product that was very much like Product Hunt for that. And had sort of realized I'd had the chicken and egg problem of there wasn't enough people to vote these projects on day one. And so I ended up turning that into a newsletter. And so that forced me on a daily basis to just learn, to learn enough about the space to be able to talk about stuff. It also let me like interview artists and dig into projects. And so I got to learn a ton there. But by building that, I built a system that you could log in with a wallet and you could connect Twitter and you could connect Discord. That was what Alpha Drop allowed you to do. And so second project was like, I saw like I think it was the CryptoPunk sales bot on Twitter. It was so engaging. Everyone loved it. So I built a platform for people to launch sales bots on Twitter. I can't remember if that launched before or after PREMINT, to be honest. But while I was building that, I was noticing, this is September of last year, noticing every drop that came out was getting botted. Every drop had huge gas war. So it was really frustrating as a collector. I was noticing some artists, and the one that ended up working with the most on it was Pindar Van Arman, who did BitGans. And what he was doing is he was collecting names with a Google form, and it would say, what's your wallet address? What's your Twitter name or Discord name? And so I asked him, we're talking. I was just asking him, like, what do you do with this list? And he's like, oh, it's such a nightmare. I've got to verify the wallets are correct. I need to see who they are on Twitter or Discord. And then he had some way of checking to see, because bots were filling out his form, but he could see when people were submitting. He was seeing patterns. And so he had all these scripts to dedupe it. And it was so clear to me that was a good problem that he was solving, but not a great solution, because it ended up costing him so much time in trying to figure it out. And so that's really where PREMINT started, was talking to him about that and me being like, let me just build you something tomorrow that might be able to do a little bit better. So I took the the Alpha Drop code, and I moved it into a new repo, and that allowed you to go to a page. You could connect your wallet, you could connect your Discord, and you could connect your Twitter, and that's literally all it did. And then the projects or the creators could launch a page that people could do that on, and then it would just basically put an entry on the page. It was super simple. It took me about 3 hours to build. And so that was sort of the genesis of PREMINT, was that just like, for one artist, let me give you something. Let me know if this makes your life any better. And it over the next few weeks, it ended up doing a lot of stuff that we ended up ripping out when it went to scale. But it was like an immediate painkiller for him. And it, I gave it to some other artists in that Discord, and some people, a handful of people used it, but it was pretty much just like less than a dozen artists for the first like 3 months. Like no one really used it that much, but it was solving like a critical pain point for them. And as more people signed up, more people saw it. So more artists said like, oh, can I set one of those up for me? I think it might've been invite only. I don't really remember. But it took a little while for it to start building steam, just because it was so, I wasn't building it with like a huge megaphone or some way of distributing it to everyone. It just sort of organically growing.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think like the things that stick out to me are, you bootstrap this whole thing, and I'm reminded of like Picasso being asked for a diagram or an illustration, and does it very quickly, and the person's like, he's like, well, this is a lot of money, and he's like, but it took you 2 seconds. It's like, you're not paying for the time it took me to do it. You're paying for all the experience that it took to build me able to do it. And all of your prior endeavors, really this rapid iteration and the relentless focus on the creator, it's a beautiful story. What are some of the things that surprisingly didn't go well in the beginning stages with those 12 to, there's millions of people using it now? Like, what's one that stands out of like, oh yeah, that was something that I could have done a little differently?
It wasn't built for scale. Just to kind of go back for a second though, and talk about it, like it's so much of like allowlist products, because there's a ton of products like PREMINT now, seem so obvious now. Like, of course you will have people follow people on Twitter, or of course you're token gating it. Like none of that had ever been done before. and I didn't invent it. I just built it as creators asked for it, right? So the initial premium, like I said, was the goal of it was the same Twitter account couldn't sign up 2 times for a project. That was how we debotted, because you had no way of proving that who you were, and so you couldn't have the same wallet and the same Twitter account, and the same Discord sign up for a product. And that was a huge like sort of step forward, but like compared to the product it is today, it did basically nothing. And then, creators would be like, hey, it'd be really cool if I could get them to follow me for my new project, or hey, I have this other collection. Can I only offer people spots on my list that own something from the other collection? Or, oh, hey, can I like make sure they at least have a certain amount of ETH in their wallet enough to afford the thing that I'm selling? And so it's funny to look back at that first product because it just did nothing, and it wasn't obvious what it should do because it had never been done before. And then it was that community that was just asking me questions and asking me to add stuff over the last year that's what you would consider boilerplate features. Like now it's pretty obvious, but it wasn't that. Because of that, I would say the things that didn't go well is like I kind of came out and said, hey, this is going to fix bots, fix botting, and there was still plenty of ways to get around that. People were buying Discord accounts and spinning up new wallets and buying Twitter accounts and still be able to register a bunch of times. The biggest issue from a user standpoint, external user standpoint, that happened was just scale, because none of this was built to handle even hundreds of users at the same time. And literally, it's not even so much it wasn't built. I put it on like servers that just weren't, they were just sort of hobby servers. They weren't for lots of traffic. And so I remember being at a pumpkin patch with my wife and my daughter, and I didn't know anyone knew that PREMINT existed really, and getting a bunch of errors because DK, which is DK Motion, decided to put it as part of the workflow in getting on his Let's Walk list. So you had to like play a game, you had to fill out a Google form. At some point you were given a PREMINT link, and like 5,000 people hit that link at the same time, and the site just fell over. And I like opened Twitter. I felt horrible because he was just like, oh, sorry, the PREMINT's broken. Don't use it. Like, we'll get a different link up there. And just, I had no idea. Like the idea of more than 10 people coming to the site at a time just hadn't really been considered. So when I had thousands coming, so there were a lot of moments like he broke it, Rug Radio broke it, because Rug Radio did their whole Genesis NFT token giveaway through PREMINT. They were like, we were going to collect 19,000 addresses through here, and those are the 19,000 people who are going to get to be able to mint for free. That fell over many times trying to do that because Farouk's audience is enthusiastic. And then it's funny to talk about this today, but a year ago today we did the XCOPY grifters allow list. So his was a little different. He already had given, like, that's a 666 collection. I think if I can remember, these numbers are a little not totally accurate, but like 450 or so were given in a certain way, and there was 200 that were going to be raffled off. And so they were going to do a raffle. No, I know what it was. There were 200 left to mint that hadn't been minted yet, because you had to have a token or something to mint the first ones. And so Async was doing the launch, and XCOPY's fans broke Async. So like the whole site was down because of XCOPY's mint. And so they called me and they said, we want to switch this whole thing to a raffle. We want to collect addresses on PREMINT. We want to run a raffle, and then we're only going to give those 200 people access to mint. And so that like was another fire drill that required, spinning up more servers than we could ever need, and just trying to support that traffic. So I would say the first, really up and through the beginning of this year, like traffic was a huge issue for us, because the Web3 community, when they want something, they come in droves. And so those were always the dark moments when these creators put their trust in us to be able to handle this thing, and it didn't stand up for it. It didn't stand up for the traffic or whatever. So plenty of those moments.
You do any sort of successful thing, it's not about just the wins. You got to come through some of the rough patches. But I meant what I said, that this is like Kleenex, Google, and PREMINT. Like there are things that exist in the world, and I think the positioning and your dedication to it really shine through. I think what's really much more interesting to our community at this juncture is like, all right, so you've been sitting on a trove of data and best practices, and you've seen, we'll get to talking about Tim Ferriss's Cockpunch here in a little bit, but what are some of the 101, 102, 103 type advice check sheets that you go through now with these projects that has evolved over the past 6 months. I feel like there was a free wave that came. Then now we're back to, I think, minting at a regular clip on projects that have like doxed backers and are well supported. What is your standard check sheet of going into work with a project, your own red flags, and then advice that you're giving to those projects now in this environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's so interesting because everyone says that, like, creators kind of don't want bots, they don't want flippers, they want real people collecting the NFTs, which is generally how most creators feel. But it's almost like some of that, not bots, but the flippers are sort of a necessary evil. And so people who over optimize, especially in this market, for like making sure that just real people are getting, like, being super empathetic to real collectors during a mint, sometimes ends up shooting themselves in the foot, because they rule out optionality, really, when it comes to like and they reduce FOMO, they reduce momentum. And so I'll use an example without using a specific name, but like there was a fairly well-known celebrity that did a project a couple months ago. I wouldn't say we were full bear market, but we weren't in the full bull. And so not the most like not the easiest time to mint, but certainly not as bad as it is now. And they did use PREMINT. They collected an enormous allow list. They had, I forget the token size, but they did an allow list, not over allocated, which I think is great. The size of the number of tokens were available. And then I recommended they do a wait list. So anyone who wasn't able to mint at the beginning could mint during the waitlist period. They put some names on that, and then they did a public phase. That's kind of my recommended flow for a good mint. They decided to do a 24-hour mint, and they didn't think about the fact that, like, because they wanted it to be inclusive to the whole world, which I'm a fan of. But like ultimately, like, I think that every creator's goal when doing a mint, and this might sound crappy, but like I think every creator's goal should be to sell out. I think it's in every single person in the ecosystems, in that collections ecosystem, it's everyone's benefit if it sells out. Because if it doesn't sell out, I think it does all kinds of wonky things with secondary floor values, all that stuff. So it's like smaller supply is better if you can sell it out versus a bigger supply. I think everything should be optimized for sellout. And what they did, and a lot of people don't think about that. And so they sort of did this long allow list period, which gave everyone plenty of time to come in and take their time to mint. So no one really rushed into mint. And then other people who came to mint saw that no one else was minting, and they didn't mint. And then that sort of continued. And then by the time they got out of the allow list, like only 10 or 15 or 20% of the collection had been minted. So the wait list were like, well, what do we care? This clearly isn't working. And so the whole thing kind of fell apart. They ended up not minting out. And I've seen that happen a lot. And so I think like going in, over the last 6 months, that's the thing that hasn't changed. You need to like make sure that, I think you need to make sure you're structuring the whole thing to be able to sell out. I think it's in everyone's best interest. And so I think that people just need to be like considerate on exactly like to get there, what's the formula that they're using to be able to do that? How many people from their existing community do they want to bring in and make sure they have spots? How many people from new communities? So it's not just sort of an insular collection and an insular holder sort of community. So it's like people from all other communities. So that's why we built a collabs feature. And I think like collabs are a great way to get the word out. And then I think you need to sort of like make sure it's not just, if every single person that owned your NFT, in most cases, there's certainly like great artists that have been able to manage to make this not necessarily true, but you kind of want an active secondary market. So if you only let people in who are going to hold it forever, you're never going to have an active secondary market. So it's like a formula you need to think through. And I just think it takes a lot of time and effort to really make sure that you have everything dialed in. And so I think you just need to really think about a strategy around being able to introduce a collection to the world and sort of make sure that it has a good initial bump. And bump, what I mean bump is like really just activity, not necessarily price, but like there's excitement around it. And then, whether or not you want to release what your roadmap is going to be or not, like you have some sort of a plan to sort of, how are you going to maintain value over time, if that's something that's important. Sometimes artists, like there are a lot of artists, and I think of it more of a business, obviously. Like if you're an artist just releasing art, then it kind of doesn't matter. If you don't care about selling out or whatever. But so I think you really have to figure out what's the collection, what are your motivations, and then you have to build a strategy around it. Which I think is actually a really healthy place for us to be. If you're asking me like 8 months ago, I'd be like, you can put anything you want out and it would sell out in 2 seconds and there'd be a gas war. We're in a little bit of a bear, but it's sort of healthy because people have to really put in the time and effort into making something successful. So that's a rambling answer. But
no, I for one am thankful for the thoughtfulness with which projects are now launching. I think it's a testament to the space that we're in now, and the market is certainly pressuring folks to be selective in how they participate, but also sharing back that value of like, what are you actually supposed to achieve and get from this mint? Let's talk a little bit about the pre-mint collector pass that you launched. So you launched that more recently. Talk to us about like how that started. What was the thought process behind saying, I think this is a good way to go, and give us your thoughts there.
Yeah. So the evolution of pre-mint was launch this random thing to a couple artists. Oh my God, people are starting to use it, and we should turn this into something. If we turn it into something, it might get expensive because we have to start paying for servers that can support massive amount of traffic. All right, well, how do we want to monetize it? Well, my background is building SaaS tools. Cool, we'll just charge people to use it. How are we going to do that? We could do credit card. Oh, what if we release an NFT? So that got us to the point of creators. And so I released this creator pass on OpenSea. It was just part of, like, I would literally go into the OpenSea UI and click create, upload an image of a little card that said pre-mint creator pass. And I think I created like 10 or 15 of them. And I was like, maybe someone will buy this. And they ended up selling. And I did that manually for, I think, 800 or 900 passes. And so we had this one sort of revenue stream and product geared towards creators so that they paid us money to be able to like launch projects and continue to develop the software. Very healthy, normal SaaS business. I didn't really think about the collector side. And so up until like March, April, we didn't really have a place for collectors to see what lists they'd sign up for, or there was no emails that went out when they signed up or when they won. There's just no collector side of this. And so around February, the collectors, we had, I think, 200 or 300,000 wallets that had registered for pre-mints. And the collectors started getting a little bit more noisy and saying, oh, this is just confusing. I don't even remember what I signed up for. Can you build this whole suite of tools for us also? And so it was starting to realize that we were this marketplace, and the creators are coming and putting sort of that supply side in already. And every pre-mint page, when you signed up, there was no next button, there was no back button. You closed the browser window. That was the user experience. And so decided basically at the beginning of this year to build out the collector side of pre-mint. And looked at a couple different ways of doing it and thought it would be interesting and a cool experiment to run, to do it all token gated behind a regular sort of membership NFT. So we launched the Collector Pass April 1st. It's a 10,000K supply. It basically gives you access to this whole other side of the software that lets you get your full history of what you've signed up for, what you've won. It has a calendar of all the mints on pre-mint and all the ones that you've signed up for. It has an iCal feed. So in your iPhone or on your computer, you can see all the mints that are coming up. You get alerts and reminders to be able to actually show up and mint. It lets you browse all the projects on pre-mint. That's the only way you can like actually see the whole library of projects on pre-mint. You get a bunch of discounts and stuff to different products. And then sort of the main feature that everyone loves it for is creators. There's a big button in every creator project page that says give spots to pre-mint collector pass holders. And so when any of the creators are building out new projects, they can automatically like open up, part of their allow list to pre-mint collectors. And so I was actually thinking this morning I should I should pull how many spots have been given to collectors. I guarantee you it's over 100,000, but I could be wrong. We'll see. I'll pull that sometime. I'm going to do sort of an end of year review. But all these projects, sometimes they give 50 spots, sometimes they give, a few hundred. Tim gave 500. We've had ones give 1,000. Like people come and they're like, all right, this is a collector group. These people love collecting, buying, selling NFTs. We want to get them involved in what we're doing. And so a lot of the reasons that people buy the pass is just to be able to have like sort of a never-ending list of projects to evaluate and get on the allow list for. So that, that's what we did. We did a 10K drop on April 1st. It sold out. And then that community, there's clearly like the creator pass is sort of, you buy it and you burn it to be able to use it. So there's no secondary market. It's a weird NFT because it's not really resellable, but the collector pass is just a fluid market. So if you buy it and you don't feel like you're getting value, you can sell it. That next person can log in and you lose access to the dashboard. Your feed shuts down. All the stuff you had shuts down if you sell it, and the new person gets to use it. So we basically have this revolving 10,000 customer base, which in itself has been a really interesting experiment as far as how you monetize a SaaS tool. So anyway, that's the overview of it. And it's a 2-year pass. So when people, or 20-month pass. So people bought it April 1st. It lasts through the rest of this year. I built an allow list of about 36,000 people who wanted to buy the pass. So I was about 3.5 times over the interest level. We picked winners. Everyone was like we had 1,000 people on the allow list, or 10,000 people on the allow list. And then it was 4 a.m. the day of that I announced, like, I promoted this as a 8-month pass to last through the rest of 2022, but we're going to go ahead and add a whole nother year to it. And so it lasts through the end of next year. Yeah.
I love how you're thinking about this as a SaaS product. I feel like there are so many projects that are folks that are like, I can do a project, and they launch one, and then they're like, I'm not really sure what to do next. And so having this breadth of experience in SaaS, your experience at Google, I'm sure was a whole other hour or so at least that we could talk about what the takeaways for your experiences there would be. But for our builder community, like, it's really important that business fundamentals are front and center. Like, projects are businesses. They might be a community, they might be an art project, they might be a gate into another tool, but it's really critical that the Web3 ethos carries on, but blocking and tackling and basics of business still apply. And I love how all of that bleeds through everything that you're talking about in rapidly iterating, testing, launching trials, customer feedback. Like, the tenets are all the same. They just, the more things change, the more they stay the same in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I made the decision early. You mentioned that we bootstrapped. I made the decision not to raise venture capital, and my plan is still not to raise venture capital. And I think the way that you can, same with Podpage. Like, I've just chosen revenue monetization early over sort of like that VC model of just grow at all costs and then monetize later. And so that, because of that, it forces you to have to actually figure out money at the beginning, as opposed to being able to sort of offer a service and you never truly know if anyone is going to pay for it. I mean, so we're looking at this with Twitter right now, right? Like, Twitter's about to start charging people to use Twitter, and it's been around for 10 years, and it's still a question mark of how many people are going to pay for it, because they've just anchored everyone to should be free. And so, for me, it's definitely helped. It's slowed growth, right? PREMINT I think there's a lot of competitors to PREMINT that probably wouldn't exist if PREMINT was free, because a lot of times their whole pitch, literally one of them launched and their headline on their front page was PREMINT but free. I politely asked them to not use that as their main pitch, but a lot of people are like, yeah, I mean, you have to pay for PREMINT and you don't have to pay for a product, and that certainly hurts us from a customer acquisition standpoint. But it also allows us, in a very like horribly bear market where there's a lot of people going out of business right now, we're still fine because we've always had a revenue model that will help us sustain through these periods. So it's just a different way of doing it. I think that it's worked for us though.
Yeah, I live in the Valley. I understand that method has been pushed very widely for a very long time when money was free, quote unquote free. But at some point, somebody has to pay for something. So I applaud you for taking that. Or someone buys it.
The consumer app that we did in 2012, 2013 was no one could argue that our business model was build it to be big and sell it to Facebook or Google or something like that. It was a photo sharing app. There was ironically, it still exists, and the people who are running it have monetized it by selling like photo books, and it's become a nice little business, but it's not a VC business. So when we raised money from Silicon Valley venture capitalists, it was, no, we need to turn this into $100 million to $1 billion acquisition. That's the revenue model. Let's not even talk about how we'll make money. And so it was fun to do that once, but it's not necessarily, I think, a healthy way for me personally. And some people love that. Some people like having a huge war chest, hiring a shitload of people, and just like building a company, but not really building a business. I found myself more drawn to trying to build, I'm more satisfied building a small business than a big company, I think. But that's just me. Different people are motivated in different ways.
It's great that you've highlighted the spectrum of ways in which everyone can be successful. And especially as an entrepreneur, these are paths that you might wander down at some point. I think it's wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about Tim and Cockpunch and what gets you excited there, and how did this come to be, and what's been surprising about it. But how did Cockpunch come to be? And I don't really want to say that word again. I am one of the folks who was like, could have picked a different word, but I digress.
Well, I did not know the name of the project when we started working with him on it. So I've known Tim for like a decade. And he and I have been talking about sort of what is the Tim Ferriss entry into Web3 looks like. And the obvious one is, he's got millions and millions of fans, some sort of membership NFT type thing that gets you access to the world of Tim, right? That's just so obvious. And he was like, he's tried subscription stuff before, and he's never really wanted to do that. Like, he has a business model that works for the podcast. He has sort of the business model that works for Tim. And he was like, if I get into NFTs, I want to have fun. And that's been like his driver for this, was like, and he's been very honest about this with every interview he's ever done around it. He was like, I just want to, he's never written fiction. I want to write fiction. I want to create like a fictional world. I want to create fictional characters. I want it to be absurd. I want it to be just make people laugh. I just want it to be fun. And so he gave me a little bit, and so we've been talking for like a year about it. And but he's got really more serious about 3 or 4 months ago. And he said the same thing that most pre-mint people ask me. How do I get who does the contract? How do I do a mint, right? And the mint is primarily 2 things. It's a contract and a mint page. And so he had already planned to use pre-mint for collecting interest. And then he was like, but how do I actually get the mint done? And I said to him what I've said to probably 500 other creators that asked me this question. You can hire someone. There's Manifold's got some cool tools. I got to figure those out. Like, I don't really know, to be honest. We did a custom page. I was like, Tim, you probably want to do a custom page for yours because you're Tim. It's never a great answer because I don't think there's any great tools. There's starting to be some better tools, but there weren't like any obvious ones for him. And so we've been talking about doing mint pages at pre-mint for a very long time, because for us, one of the biggest problems with pre-mint is people will use it to lure a group of people into thinking they're going to buy something great and then take them to a mint page that has a contract that's a wallet drainer. And we've done all kinds of stuff to help with that. But ultimately, like, if we don't own the minting experiences, we can't guarantee anything that happens on that third-party site. And so it's sort of been an obvious thing for us to be able to offer minting. It's not really a business model that I'm particularly excited about, because I think it's a race to the bottom, to be honest. I think there's so many people trying to own the mint experience that I've been having fun sort of trying to like really make the pre-mint experience amazing and letting everyone else kind of fight over the mint experience. But it's always been interesting to us to do. And we did it for the pre-mint pass. So I was like, all right, we can repurpose some of that pre-mint pass logic, which was an ignorant thing to think because we ended up rewriting everything. And if we can find someone else to do the contract, we'll do it for you. And so that was it. It was like, if we were ever going to do a mint page experiment, I wanted to do a big one. Like, it would be no fun to do a mint page experiment with an artist that no one knew about, or a collection that wasn't going to be popular. Like, if you're going to do it, you should do it like under a lot of pressure. And so it was great. And Tim has a really straightforward way of looking at stuff like this, which is, I don't care about making the mint page like creative or clever or move, or he's like, I just want people to be able to click a button. He's very good at optimizing for what's important. And I told him, I was like, our mint page is going to be basic, but it's going to work really, really well. But if you want like glitz and glamour, I don't want to build that. And he and I were very aligned with like, we just want this page to just work really well. And so we partnered together. I helped him sort of organize the allow list part, which was fun because it's been a while since I've been heavily involved, kind of since the pre-mint pass, that heavily involved in a very, very in-demand allow list and all the problems and opportunities that brings. And yeah, so, helped him through the whole process. We did the mint. I guess it's been about a week. Not to boast, but the mint itself, the mint process itself, I think was about as flawless as it could have been. We had a couple weird glitches with people who needed to cancel transactions and then re-trigger them. So we had to help them through that. But it was like, for the amount of traffic and demand for that mint, the mint was really good. So I'm really proud of that. And yeah, I'm excited to see what he does with the collection, right? He countless times had told people, this is going to be silly, it's absurd, don't buy this as an investment. But you know how the Web3 community gets when they see something that might sell out, right? Everyone apes in, then everyone goes crazy on secondary. And then especially with the reveal, every reveal I've ever seen ever, it's like price goes up, reveal happens, price goes down. Everyone's pissed that they bought before the reveal. All of that same stuff happened. And so it was fun. It's actually been fun to see that happen in a bear market where generally nothing is working. And so now we'll see what he does. I'm excited to see what he does with this. He's having a lot of fun doing fictional writing. And I think I just saw on my way to sit down for this that he launched a new podcast around it. And he has, I don't know what Tim's actual podcast is in the top 10 on the planet, right? Of all the people in the world, the podcasters, he is one of the top on the planet. And so he just launched a second podcast. So that should be cool. I have no clue how he's going to like bring these worlds together. So I don't know. I think it's going to be fun to watch, but I think a lot of people are thinking a little short-sighted around, the 3 or 4 days after mint and what they expected versus what they got and all that stuff. I think we'll have to wait and see on this one.
Kudos to you for shepherding him through that, for taking a big risk and betting on the pre-mint capabilities. I think it's a great story that you just shared with us, and I'm thankful that you're here for it. And yeah, like Web3 degens, like I always go out and say, like, it is not my thing. I have lost way more money. I now buy things that I keep and hold, and I like them, and they're pretty things that I look at. That's like, it took me a lot of pain and stress to figure out that that's my lot in life. I'm not going to be front running trades and transactions. It's just not my thing. And yet through all of that, yeah, when reveal happens, buy the dip, because it's just as timeless as it gets.
Yeah. One thing I'll share, I don't know if I've shared this. I don't know if he shared it, so I can't give too much information out, but like, everyone is so like pessimistic and thinks that everyone's like trying to, everything's been optimized to be like negative and to get them. Or someone was really angry because they thought that the way that we did the mint was preying on like was a guaranteed. I forget what they were bitching about. They were saying like, if you cared about people, Tim would have released 100,000 tokens because this was guaranteed to cause a gas war, to cause hype after pre-reveal, all this stuff. Like people like got so upset thinking like that was like some sort of engineered for bad. And like looking to, again, hindsight is 2020. Looking back, it was great. It ended up being crazy popular. High demand mint. And sold out within like seconds of hitting the wait list. There was like 5,000 people, 4,800, 4,600 tokens were bought during the 1 hour allow list period. And then about 200 were bought in the first like second of the wait list. So everyone looks at that and goes, oh, you've over allocated. You did this horrible thing. You put too many people on the wait list. We were legitimately shocked at the amount of like activity there was coming in. And some people want to believe that. I don't really give a shit if people believe it or not. But like when you've looked at mints recently, it sort of defied a lot of odds. I mean, I've been giving Tim a lot of advice on like, you just don't know. He kept asking me, how many people are going to show up for this from the allow list? How many people? I was like, I have no idea. You're putting, a bunch of people who are really on your mailing list, so they're not even Web3 people, into this allow list because you want to reward your community. Those people might not even have wallets. So I don't even know if they show up, do they even know what button to click? And if they don't show up and click the button and all the Web3 people come and they see that there's not a lot of demand, they won't buy. Like, we had no idea if it would sell out. Now I mean, same thing with the pre-mint pass, but this was back in the bull market. My wife and I were having dinner before the pre-mint pass. She goes, "Oh, you're selling 10,000 tokens tomorrow and you have 36,000 people on your list. That's amazing. You're going to sell out." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know that. You have no idea." And so even with like Tim being Tim, like, a few weeks prior, like there wasn't a lot of buzz about it. Like, I don't know, it took a lot of work to get people excited about it. And then sort of, and it from a mint perspective, it worked out, but we were all like, "Oh my God, like that was crazy," right? Like, we would of course done things differently if we would have known that there was going to be that much craze around it. But you don't know. And I think that, like, thinking about builders, like, I've now been doing this for a year. We've done 30,000 mints or 30,000 allow lists. Those are real allow lists. There's plenty of other small ones. So there's, we've had 40 or 50 million registrations. Like, you'd think that I know, you just don't know in this market. The market's always changing. Like, we postponed the mint date for Tim like multiple times because we were like, well, people are going to be at Art Basel, or people are going to be, ramping up to Thanksgiving. We should push it off. We don't want people to be distracted. All of that was because we just didn't know. And so anyway, it was awesome to see such a huge amount of demand. It was a shame to see sort of the degen world step in and sort of build their own narrative, which I thought was, but like, and then people were giving him shit about all the money that he raised went to charity, right? Like, if he cared, if he was doing a cash grab and he had that much demand, he probably could have, minted at a much higher price, raised more money for charity. And then people were pissed that he owned the charity, or that the charity is like his foundation, which he has years of charitable contributions, but people were pissed that then people were arguing like he's trying to rug us because the money went to his charitable contribution, not even talking about the fact that like most mints just go into the founder's pockets. So like somehow Tim doing going through a charity, the whole thing was like, it got pretty negative for a few days, which was frustrating. But like, it only got negative because it was really popular, and that was not something that we even knew was going to happen. Like, we were all very pleased with the mint day. So anyway,
again, kudos on a very successful mint and project, and pre-mint doing its thing really well. We have 5 minutes left. I want to just remind folks that the PO app is still available. It is PREMINT X CPG, all lowercase, no spaces, PREMINT X CPG. So what is next for, like you say, you don't know what's going to happen. And so I'll preface this by emphasizing, like, I don't think any of us do. Who would have thought that FBI, that Sam Bankman-Fried would get arrested last night? I did. I was happy on that. But what do you think is 2023 for pre-mint? What are the trends that you're seeing? And then what specifically is your product take?
Yeah, feel free to wave me off because this is going to be a tough one for 3 or 4 minutes, but I'll try to go quickly. So the mint page experiment was a big success, but we're still evaluating whether we're going to turn that into a product that everyone can use. And so we might do a few more mints there if we find the right partners to do them with, but that won't be a scaled product in the short term. We've actually released it, we just haven't really announced it, a whole product for pre-mint that's really focused around community and collab managers. And so we've always focused on the creators and the collectors. Now there's that third piece, which is the people who run Discords that are getting spots and all that. And so we've built what I think is like a really amazing and elegant solution for that we're just starting to get into communities that, does everything from giving the collab managers a whole dashboard of all the collabs that are coming in, allowing them to approve them or deny them, feature them on their own like collab page that's hosted by Premint, have them all go into Discord so their community members can register within Discord without actually having to go to Premint anymore. Mint reminders for the specific community going through Discord, all that stuff. So I think the community product is going to be a really important and fun thing to work on for the next 3 to 6 months as we kind of make sure that we built the right product. So that's rolling out. And then on the side of communities, we acquired Vulcan, which is like by far the best, in my opinion, Discord token verification solution. And it is the most elegant. You go into XCOPY's Discord, you click verify, and then it just sits in like you watch it. It checks for your wallet. If you're in Premint, it looks at Premint. It finds the roles for you. It assigns the roles. You don't have to click any links. You don't have to leave Discord. You don't have to. There's no DMs. There's no wallet connection. It is so good. And so there's so much to be built off of that. We've got a huge roadmap for Vulcan. And this whole post-mint world, right? You've minted, now you have this community on Discord, and all we really do right now is verify roles for you. But there's we're working on a support tool that allows you to have a one-on-one conversations with your holders and have a little context around who the people you're talking to. There's just more insights into who the people are who are in your community. There's us helping you get more of your community into your Discord. There's ways to engage, have the community sort of like self-engage. So you as the creator don't have to be in there like poking the community and keeping people going all the time. There's so much that we're doing with that. And I feel like where 2022 might have been the year of pre-mint, I think we will continue to attach a little bit more to Vulcan over the next year and really put a lot of effort into that, because I think that there's a lot of communities that had a successful mint and they have a community and they're like, oh, now what do we do? Right? We've got all these people in Discord. This is hard. It's really hard to manage Discords and understand who these people are. And so we have a really ambitious roadmap there. So those are kind of what we're working on. And sort of, you've noticed the theme is community, right? There's going to be a lot of people coming into the space next year, and we'll be there to support them through allow lists and potentially the mint experience. But there's a lot of people from this last run that are like these communities that exist that just could be so much better. And the people working on those communities could have a much better experience. And so we're building a lot of tools for them.
Well, I'm going to raise our team's hand to help you beta that. Our mods are spectacular, and I'm sure would love to dig in with you on anything that you want to throw our way. Yeah. We are at time. I'm happy to go over. Thank you for sharing so much about your journey and your insights. Our community of builders look to these types of products that you've specifically built for inspiration, for playbooks. I would love for us to go over and for you to just give one piece of advice that a builder can take away in all of your experience that they can just hold on to. There's a depth of experience that you bring forward, especially in this Web3, which there isn't a lot of depth in Web3 because it's new, but your whole journey of getting to this point is an inspiration, I think, for a lot of us. So if there's a parting word, we're going to have you sign off with that last bit of advice for our builders, and then we will see you in the chats.
Yeah, cool. So I'll cheat and I'll do two. One is, I would say, one is my advice in general for builders, but then another, I'll start with the one that's specific to Web3. And this isn't just for builders, this is for artists, this is for people who are getting into it. I gave this advice to Tim. I think Web3 has been my most satisfying group of people to build for ever. I've loved working one-on-one with the creators and one-on-one with collectors and just the community to develop products and to get feedback. However, it is the meanest group of people I've ever been around as a whole, right? There's people they hide behind anonymous avatars, and they are just that. I think that breeds this, not everyone, but when you're in this community, I've never had more vitriol thrown at me in my life. And you saw it with Tim's reveal the other day. You see it all over the place. People are losing money, and so they're upset. And it's just, all that said, that's just part of it. And if you don't want to put yourself up for that, then this is a horrible community to build for. There's a lot of good, but there's no way to get to the good without putting yourself in front of all the bad. And so you have to just go into it not taking a lot of stuff personally, because I've tried a million different ways to do this. There's no way to avoid it. And I think it's sad, but I also think it's just whatever. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about it because it is what it is. So anyone who's building for the space, you just have to push through that, because it really, Tim asked me the other day, how do you deal with, people being upset about X, Y, or Z? The pre-mint pass minted at a certain price, speculative nonsense drove it up to 10x that price, and it's sort of come back down. So there's a lot of people who bought high and they're upset and all that. And so they've come up with stories and things to say to me that are very hurtful. And I think that if you're going to build in the space, you have to be ready for that. It's worth it. And most of the time, the person who's being hurtful is just sort of some random person who, has a a random NFT as their avatar, and they don't have their name. Like, and it's okay. Like I don't know. I think it's important to say this because it's really bad. And it's I know like Zenek has talked a little bit about this too. It's like, it's hard to like continue to want to wake up and build when there's so much negativity being spewed all over the place. However, if you can filter that out, it is such a good place to build. So that's the first thing I'll say. It's a shame, but it's part of it, and you just have to accept it. The second thing, and like I said, it's not everyone. There's just a lot of people out there that the loudest people are the meanest. That's number one. Number two, I still don't know what I'm doing, right? Like, it's the whole point of me telling that story around the conversations around Tim and being surprised on Mint Day is like, you'd think that looking back, you're like, oh, you knew that was going to be a huge home run. It probably would be, but we didn't know that. We couldn't assume that. And like the stuff that we're building right now for community managers and stuff for PREMINT, like I hope people like it. We're figuring that out right now, and we've been doing this for a year as sort of the leader, and we still don't know if this product is going to be successful for them. And so, like, it sometimes looks easy for someone like Manifold, for example, who just seem to be like, they're so good at a lot of their products are so great, or I don't know, or PREMINT or Proof, or some of the communities that seem to be like firing all cylinders. Like, it seems easy, and then like they miss something. We miss something. Like we've had plenty of product releases that just fell flat in the last like few months. And so as a builder, it doesn't matter how well you've done, you're still basically like relearning every day. We have a little bit of a brand, of a advantage because we have a decent brand, but we might launch something and no one uses it, and that's okay. Like, the only way to know is if you just get stuff out there. So if this is a builder community, the thing I always say to people is like, get your shit out there in front of customers or users as quickly as possible in whatever state it can stand up in. Because like, if you spend months and months building something and you're not sure if anyone's going to like it, and then they don't, it's really hard to like get back on the horse. But if you spend like a week building something, put it out there, they don't like it, but they have some interesting feedback, like in a month or two, you might have something that's really strong. And that's what happened to PREMINT. If I would have waited 6 months for it to be perfect, someone else would have done it much better. So that's my biggest advice to builders is always just keep plugging away and like get stuff, iterate really quickly. And then the asterisk that I would put on this, as we've already talked about, is like have the like sort of confidence to charge people to use the thing you're building if you need to make money off of it. Don't give it away for free forever.
Brenden, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to watching and continuing to connect our wallets and our accounts to PREMINT. Looking forward to those mod and community tools that you are building, and we will most definitely be in line waiting for them as they come out. All right, folks, we're wrapped for today. We have our town hall on Friday. Hope to see you there. We're very excited about that. We have a lot of juicy, great alpha to release. We will see you soon. Brenden, thanks once again. So long, everybody.
Thank you for having me.